Formally say welcome to everyone that's just joined the call. Good to have you on this week. If I share my screen. So the main theme for our call this week, which we'll get onto in a moment, Libor from CZNIC has kindly agreed to join us to talk about DNS over QUIC, but this time on authoritatives rather than on recursive resolvers. And rather like our conversation last week with Jeff Huston, this is recording a presentation that Libor sort of first delivered or delivered when I first saw it, I should say, at OARC, the OARC meeting immediately after IETF 114 a couple of weeks back in Philadelphia. I thought it had some interesting content, which is why I asked him if he would be happy to reprise it, which he pleasingly has. But before we get on to that, as per usual, I'll then just sort of talk about some recent news headlines just to sort of draw your attention, plus a few forthcoming events, and signpost some upcoming topics that we've got lined up over the next couple of months. And then, time permitting, we get on to any other business, which I think should take us up to the hour or thereabouts. So without further ado, let me stop sharing these slides and then share Libor's slide even, which hopefully you can now see Libor's slide on your screen. And let me welcome Libor on the call, as I say, from CZNIC. So just share his thoughts on DNS over QUIC on authoritative, and you can see from the side the various aspects. Hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions. So if you have any you want to raise, put them in the chat, or use the Zoom tool to raise your hand. But Libor, sorry, you're about to say, so do come in at that point.
Yeah. So hi, Andrew. Hello all. I can hear my own echo. Can you do something about it? Oh, okay. It got better. So yeah, welcome on my presentation, which was originally for the OARC. I'm Libor Peltan. I'm from CZNIC. CZNIC is not only the registry of the top-level domain CZ, which is a Czech national domain, but also CZNIC runs various projects ranging from education to open source software development. And my job is the development of the authoritative DNS server called NotDNS. And in this talk, I will tell something about the implementation of DNS over QUIC and the first experience with it. So let me start with a quick overview of the QUIC protocol. So please, next slide. Yeah, the QUIC protocol is quite new and it should replace all the protocols like TCP. Despite it's using UDP packets for transporting its frames, it's a connected protocol and it's completely encrypted. It enables to send multiple streams in parallel per connection. This means that if you are sending multiple files over this protocol, you don't have to wait for the first to start transferring the second one and so on. The main feature is the much faster handshake than the common TCP with TLS on top of it. And it was designed for HTTP or HTTPS, if you will, but the faster handshakes are especially good also for DNS. So immediately there arises the question if QUIC protocol can be used for DNS. And it was first adopted by some resolvers because they were already experienced with DNS over HTTPS and other transports. But in today's talk, we will talk about the adoption of QUIC protocol also in authoritative DNS servers. Next slide, please. So let me first start with a special use case of the transport, which is zone transfers. Zone transfers is a special communication between various authoritative servers. So there are no clients, like the secondary authoritative server is a client for the primary one. So this means that this is not completely open for the wide internet. So it's like safer place when we can try out new protocol. And also the server certificates can be easily established in this communication, because the clients and servers know each other's before the communication. And the closest alternative to using QUIC for zone transfers is using TLS. So there is like two competing options of using zone transfers over TLS or zone transfers over QUIC. But QUIC is a more modern protocol, and it has quite some features for benefits. So I guess that what the vendors of authoritative servers should do is to proceed with implementation of zone transfers over QUIC. So I encourage all the vendors of authoritative servers, including me, to implement this feature. So putting this aside, I will talk about the normal queries over QUIC. This means that the authoritative server is open for the whole internet to be queried for DNS over QUIC. And this comes with quite a challenge in security. So for this sake, let me start with a short topic about how authoritative DNS servers handle attacks on other protocols. Next slide, please. So for DNS over UDP, it's quite a simple transport. So the attacker can do much. The only thing the attacker can do to the authoritative server is to flood it with so many queries that the server won't be able to handle them. And the only thing the authoritative server can do to defense is to be simply so fast that it can actually handle such flood, just answering all the queries. So to do it, it shall optimize its DNS routines. It should also optimize the networking routines, the packet handling, which quite recently has been achieved with the help of XDP technology. This is quite a topic, and it has been covered by my previous talks, like in 2020. And this way, the Linux network stack is completely bypassed, so the packets arrive directly into the user space, and this speeds up the packet handling in a way that it can handle tens of millions of queries per second. So this is the defense of DNS over UDP. Next slide, please. For DNS over TCP, there are quite many families of attacks that attackers can try. The most simple one is a SYN attack, when the attacker floods the authoritative server again with SYN packets. These are the first packets in the TCP handshake. And there are known defenses, for example, SYN cookies, that can be implemented just in the firewall, so the Linux kernel does not have to handle them. But the more sophisticated attacks, where there are many families of them, I just summarize them into slow loris, and slow loris is one of those attacks which is the most deadly one, according to my opinion. So what can the authoritative server do about those attacks is to avoid, again, processing of TCP in Linux kernel, because it has some quirks. For example, for DNS over TCP, we always struggled with file descriptors. In Linux, if you handle TCP normally, you always use file descriptors, but these are very slow in multi-threaded operation. So it's better, again, to use XDP for packet processing and complete TCP handling in the user space. by implementing custom connection tables. And this actually helps against SYN attack as well. And we can handle millions of connections per second this way. So I guess this is enough to withstand common attacks against DNS over TCP. So next slide, please. So when we were designing the first implementation of DNS over QUIC, our idea was to implement it a similar way like the DNS over TCP to be resilient against attacks by design. And this included the NotDNS, the libngTCP2 library, which I will talk about later. Also XDP packet processing again, and also custom connection tables implemented in user space. So we tried this, and we also implemented the attacking tools, which help to measure the performance of this implementation and which help to simulate attacks in laboratory conditions. And the results of this were, next slide please. The results that we observed were terrible. The performance of our first implementation of DNS over QUIC on XDP was pretty slow. It was able to handle only tens of thousands connections per second. And the reason why it's so slow, it's that the CPU is completely used by cryptographic operations. Remember that QUIC is completely encrypted protocol. And so by simply encrypting all the packets, the crypto operation completely take over the CPU. And not only that, we also observed that the memory consumption during this simulated attack went up to tens of gigabytes, which is really not nice. So can we do something about it? I hope we can. This was just the first implementation of DNS over QUIC. Next slide, please. I hope we can do better for the future. Here are some first ideas that we have. For example, for mitigating the equivalent of SYN attack, which is simply the flood with the initial packets, the first packets in QUIC Handshake. The server can reply with a so-called retry packet, which slows down the handshake. So it also slows down the legitimate connection, but at least it prevents spoofing source address by the attacker. So it shall help to some degree. And for mitigating the slow loris and other resource exhaustion attacks, we just for now have no better ideas than to simply be more powerful than the attacker. It means if you have more CPU power, then you can encrypt more packets and you can withstand the attack. If the attacker has more CPU packet in, it can encrypt faster than you and it can flood you again and completely take your resources. But for the future, maybe there will be better ideas than those. So this is about the security, which is like the first point we always focus when implementing something new. But besides this, let's talk about other features of DNS over QUIC. Next slide, please. I already said that QUIC's big feature for DNS is the QUIC handshake. But when a resolver meets an authoritative server for the first time, it has to perform the full handshake. And as you can see, the full handshake consists of several packets. First, the handshake is performed, and in the second round trip time, already the DNS query can be sent over this connection. So overall, the resolver gets its DNS answer after 2 round trip times. And it also, as part of the handshake, receives the session ticket, which can be used later for the QUIC handshake. Next slide, please. So with having this session ticket, the resolver can the second time initialize the QUIC connection much faster, and it can already encrypt the first packet and send the DNS query in the very first packet of the next connection. So this way it can get the DNS answer after just one round trip time. But as you can see, the handshake is not complete at that point, and it must send another packet to initiate the full connection, receiving another session ticket for subsequent quick connections in the future. So this means that 4 packets are sent as well. Next slide, please. So to sum this up, the quick handshake brings better latency because the resolver gets its answer usually after the first round trip time, but usually not fewer packets are sent. Maybe this can be achieved in the cases where the resolver needs to resolve multiple queries from the same authoritative server, which actually can be quite a common case. For example, first DNS key query and then the query for the name. But in general, not fewer packets are sent. And the resolver has to remember this session ticket for the long term between those connections. But the authoritative server does not have to remember anything. It can be stateless from this point of view. Of course, not stateless during the persistence of one quick connection. Next slide, please. Another feature of the QUIC protocol is encryption, and for the encryption to work well, the client needs to validate some certificate of the server, so it can be sure that it's talking directly with the server and not some man in the middle. But so far there is no solution for this because the common use of TLS, which we know, for example, from HTTPS, already needs the DNS to be established. And during this DNS resolving process, the resolver has no way to gather information about the server certificate in advance. So this is being researched by the IETF deprive group, the possibility how the resolver can get the server certificate in advance. But so far there is no solution. All the ideas found some hurdles that were not solved to time. So actually the deprive group suggests to use self-issued certificate for the authoritative server for now until a solution is found, and establish the encryption this way. So it is actually vulnerable to an active man in the middle that is actually sitting in the middle between the resolver and the authoritative, but it still brings some degree of privacy against, for example, man in not exactly the middle, but some other attackers that might be listening to the connection but not able to actively intercept it. Next slide, please. So the rest of my presentation will be about the design of our implementation of DNS-over-QUIC in Node.dns. For this, we use the libngtcp2 library, which is quite an attractive library, and it's used by all implementation that I know that are in C language. There are other libraries of QUIC in Go language, which is also quite popular, but we are developing in C, so we choose the libngtcp2. This library is pretty useful for handling a single quick connection. This means that it can handle all the states of the handshake, all the states of the timeout of the connection. It can also handle congestion control of the outgoing traffic, but it does not help with management of multiple quick connections at a time. So there are no connection tables. The programmer has to implement his own connection tables so that when a packet arrives, it can find a suitable connection for the packet. It has no event scheduling. This means that the programmer is responsible for finding out which of the open connections need his attention first, for example, which of them times out first. And it also needs some weird routines to interoperate with the with GNU-TLS backend, but this is getting better in the most recent versions of libngtcp2. Next slide, please. So the architecture of our implementation is using this libngtcp2 library, and we choose GNU-TLS as the crypto library because we already are using it for DNSSEC and TSIG and all the crypto stuff in DNS. We implemented our own connection tables that are similar to previous TCP over XDP implementation. So this previous implementation of TCP really helped us with this development. And we use XDP for packet processing because all the QUIC handling is taking place in user space, so it makes sense to also handle the UDP packets in user space. But XDP has its own disadvantages, so we are planning the implementation of QUIC also on top of the conventional, that means Linux kernel UDP handling, which should bring more flexibility to DNS-over-QUIC. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, the first implementation of QUIC in Node.dns is ready for trying out. So I encourage everyone to try it out. It's still being in our Git master, but it will be released in the upcoming 3.2 release, which can be expected maybe just already next week, as soon as that. So please try it out now or once we release the 3.2 version of Node.dns. And you can see that it's not difficult to configure the QUIC listening. And also our KDIC utility, which is the equivalent of DIC, except it's far better in many aspects. So our KDIC utility also supports DNS-over-QUIC. So you can try it against our authoritative server, and you can also try the KDIC against many already existing DNS-over-QUIC resolvers and proxies and so on. So this is how to try KDIC. You simply add +QUIC into parameters and it will send a query over QUIC. Next slide, please. Besides trying one DNS query over QUIC, you can also try to measure the performance of any DNS over QUIC server, and you can also try to attack it. The KXDP GAN utility uses also XDP, and it from the version 3.2, it can also send queries over DNS over QUIC. So you can measure how many queries per second is the server able to handle, and you can also try many kinds of attacks against this implementation, including the SYN attack and slow release. Next slide, please. So to summarize this whole talk, the DNS over QUIC on authoritative server brings encryption for privacy, and it also brings low latency against TCP and mostly TCP and TLS, because usually the resolver gets its answer after just one round trip time. The measured performance was so far so good for legitimate traffic because tens of thousands of queries per second is far more than the mainstream authoritative server face in the wild usually. So it is vital for displacing UDP and TCP transports in the far future. But the performance is not so high, so that the benefits of XDP packet processing are negligible. There are no millions of queries per second that would really be beneficial for XDP usage. On the other hand, the DNS-over-QUIC is so far vulnerable to denial of service attacks, and there are other quirks like the establishment of server certificates. So thank you for your attention, and I welcome the questions. I can't hear you, Andrew.
Ah, sorry, is that better? Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You preempted the question I was going to ask you about how you generated the traffic to test the performance, etc. Because you covered that in your last but one slide. But just out of interest, I don't know if this is your area, but do you know if there are any plans to support DoQ in the shotgun tool, which I think also comes from CZNIC? Is that something?
Well, this is an interesting question. Unfortunately, I'm not the developer of DNS Shotgun. Our colleagues developing Not Resolver are responsible for this, and I'm not sure about it. But I guess this is somehow planned. So in the future, I'm pretty sure it will come. I'm not able to say if sooner or later.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, I can see that Ralph has raised his hand. So a reminder, anyone else with any questions, please use the Zoom tool if you can to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. And Michael's put a comment in the chat, which I'll come to in a moment. But Ralph, do you want to come in first?
Thanks a lot, Libor, for the presentations. Were very good stuff. So, I mean, with regards to DOS, I mean, anything is can be denied of service. It just depends on the kind of size of the attacker. So what I wasn't totally sure, what is the kind of attack load that you currently would say that an attacker needs to generate to DOS a authoritative server with QUIC UDP? And I mean, are there differences in the if you run it with XTP or without XTP?
Well, mostly we are happy if we are able to answer so many queries as we can, but the difference between UDP and QUIC is in the way that UDP is limited mostly by the bandwidth. So with XDP, we were already able to answer as many UDP queries as can physically arrive at the network interface, because it's limited by the bandwidth. For example, if you send like 10 gigabit per second, fully utilized by DNS queries, then the server can probably handle it, or it can handle, yes, in general this way. But with QUIC, when the transport is encrypted, the slowest part is not the bandwidth anymore. So the slowest part is the CPU. So you can easily send those many queries that can arrive the server, because it utilizes like tens of megabit, which is quite low bandwidth, and it can still like make the server unusable because it's fully utilized by the CPU. So this is the thing that
I mean, so one of the things that I had an experience in testing kind of TCP or DOT or DOH traffic is that there is a difference if you have kind of a sustained load of queries from the same connection, or if you have new connections coming in all the time. Is that also true with the QUIC implementation that you use?
Yes, but I always presume that the attacker tries to open as many connections as possible, because this is like far more deadly attack than opening one connection and sending many queries over it. It's more probable that this attack can be handled by the server if there is just one connection.
Okay, that's understood. And last, not really a question, just confirmation. I mean, you're implemented RFC 9250 and not DOH over QUIC over. So DOH3, I believe.
No, we are not implementing DNS over HTTP in any kind in our authoritative server. It has been implemented in Not Resolver. So Not Resolver is able to listen on DOH, DNS over HTTPS, but for the authoritative server, we see no reason for this. So we are heading over for DNS-over-QUIC, pure QUIC.
Okay, thanks a lot. Very good talk. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for your questions.
Hi. I was realized I was muted. Sorry, Michael. Do come on. I see you raised your hand.
I was confused because I saw Ralph's face and then said, "Yeah." So one question I have about this, aside from the IPsec comment that I made, is so one scenario I can imagine in the future, and I don't know that it's really that good a scenario, but imagine a future where we have a large number but a finite number of these quad resolvers. Can you imagine a situation where actually we don't have to worry about denial of service, because essentially all the authoritative servers know that there's the following 100 recursive resolvers that want to talk to them, and anyone else must be an attacker. And I don't think that's a very good situation for the internet, but it does have an interesting security model that you don't have to worry as much about, because you know them by security. You don't have to worry about their IP addresses. We're not doing filtering. It's because, I don't know, they use client-side certificates or something like this for the session. And to me, this is an interesting model from a security point of view, although I think it's a bad model from the evolution of the internet point of view. But I can still see us going there for the reasons of denial of service, abatement. Would that work in your system? Would you be able to mark certain keys as being client keys that you would accept connections from and reject everyone else?
Actually, yes. I hope the future does not look like this, but if it does, it's very easy to implement everything in the way that it only allows connections from several clients that are listed in a configuration. And if this happens, then all the implementation of authoritative server and all its configuration will be pretty easy. So if this happens, we will be pretty soon ready for this. But I hope that this will never happen in the way that yes, I agree that the future is heading slightly towards the way that most of the DNS queries against authoritative server will come from a limited number of resolvers. But always there will be the open door for anyone else who can just jump in and start another resolver which is not known by the authoritative server so far. And yeah.
Well, but I can also imagine a situation where you have authoritative servers that will only answer from known things, and then you have a smaller number of resources that would answer from anybody, which is putting people into two different classes of service. On the other hand, it lets you survive 90% of a significant multi-terabit denial of service attack, and that may be valuable, particularly if we're dealing with state actors or something like this.
Yes, I understand this idea, but this way you can always think that the attack against those limited resources are ongoing for the whole time. So in fact, it will end in the situation when only the queries from the listed resolvers are working, and the other part with the limited resources allocated is completely shattered by continuing attacks. So it will again close the door for anyone new jumping in with the new resolver. But in general, let me come with an equivalent situation, which I observe in authoritative DNS server implementations. On one hand, we have those limited number of implementations of authoritative server like NodeDNS, Bind9, PowerDNS, NSD. But in the wild internet, you can always see that the remaining 1% of authoritative server is powered by some unknown implementations and really quirky and buggy implementations of authoritative server, and we can do nothing about it, including the flag days, which are on one hand, which are successful, but not 100% successful. So I think that the future of recursive resolvers, in the worst case, will look similar like this. You will have the 99% of the queries sent by the several known recursive resolver, but the rest 1% is open for anyone else, and possibly anyone with bugs or anyone attacking. That's my opinion. But let's see how the future is going, and if it will end so simple as you described, it will be very simple for us to implement this. Thank you.
Great. Thought-provoking question, Michael. Thank you. Alison, I see you've posted, I think, quite an interesting comment into the chat. I don't know if you're in a position to unmute and just expand on that. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'll read it. Oh, okay, yeah.
I can. When we wrote the spec, we didn't. There were things that were really purely QUIC issues. One being what does QUIC do about transport DDoS? What are the clearly the implications of having a lot more crypto to do is something that is a big deal for a large authoritative. And it seems to me that in the DOS case, I think it's interesting that you say that there's a SYN attack equivalent, and I think that's right. And I don't think that the QUIC working group has really done enough work on that problem. So it might be that people because big web servers and Mozilla's they tend to be fronted by CDNs who just put a lot of muscle power in, and they don't necessarily do what we do in the DNS world, which is use the resources of SYN attack algorithms and stuff like that. So it might be that more work needs to be done because the DNS-over-QUIC community has different resources to deploy and needs some more effort made on this kind of attack. So it seems like it might be worthwhile to say to the QUIC working group, here's something that's maybe not fully baked for all of your users. Can you look at it some more? And it might be that this is also relevant to other rising groups of users, not just the DNS-over-QUIC users. So I don't know if you have resources to send people to QUIC to talk about what are the equivalent algorithms and ways to help with the equivalent of SYN attacks, but I think that would be an interesting thing to do. So there's a question there. It's like, do you want to follow up? Could you at least present some more information about what you perceive about this to the QUIC working group in email or something like that?
Yes, thank you. I completely agree with this. I was just expecting to watch the scene of HTTPS, which also use QUIC, and I was going to look at the solutions that they have, because the HTTP over QUIC servers have to also implement the same defenses against those simple DOS attacks that are not DNS related, just the attacks against any server listening on QUIC.
Right, but in the web world, a large Michael might disagree with me, but Michael Richardson. But in the web world, a large website probably has a DDoS prevention provider who steps in at some point. So the thing is, I don't think that that's necessarily true of enough authoritative DNS services comparatively.
I actually totally agree with you, Alison, and that's likely the case, and I think that's the reason why DNS over HTTPS is so appealing is because you just apply the same technology again, right?
Yeah, yeah. But we went to the transport. Now we need to solve some transport problems that we didn't have. We had to use different libraries and stuff, but it simplified the DNS a lot. And there's a lot of attraction there. You can tell the benefits for the better DNS message performance, but the question is, the fact that we can't ride the coattails of DNS over HTTPS, and also, not all authoritative players want to ride those coattails. I mean, they may want to just have better solutions for the transport problems. And also for the offloading problems, the crypto offloading problems, because there too you could borrow a lot of HTTPS crypto offloading capabilities, but in DoQ, but in DoQ, that the state of crypto offloading is earlier on, but it's coming. It's coming. There's patents and write-ups and products and things like that. So it's just more, we're in an earlier, we have less coattails, but maybe it's worthwhile not to ride those coattails for DoQ for authoritatives, because DNS has some value to not riding on HTTPS.
Yes, I completely agree. And this is actually the point of our first implementation of DNS-over-QUIC in Authoritative Server, to see like the results, to see the quirks, and to see the possible space for further development. And yeah, this is an excellent point. And I agree that we can go to the authors of QUIC Protocol, maybe with a question how to deal with this. I don't completely agree on that the developers of web servers completely rely on CDNs. There are web servers in the wild that are not behind any CDN, and they need to work somehow, and they need to protect themselves against those attacks as well. So I guess there will be development of QUIC Protocol ongoing, and we will, of course, follow it with our implementation of DNS-over-QUIC.
I think we should just draw attention. Draw attention to this
future.
as a community that has needs, and you have data that shows that the transport itself could use some more capabilities for the not so big players. So I encourage you to do that. It's a great presentation you gave.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry, I interrupted a little bit. Sorry, Andrew.
That's okay. I think that was maybe a good point to finish on. So, sort of, Libor, if you and colleagues have the time, it would certainly be I think a good thing to just share that with some of the share that with the QUIC working group, to draw attention to the findings and see what work that triggers. But thank you. Let's draw a line under it there. Thank you, Libor, for sort of running through that again. I think from the questions, sort of proving that it was definitely was worth revisiting. So yeah, sounds like there'll be some further spin-offs as a consequence, which is always a good thing to stimulate further thoughts. Right, let me go back to my original slides just to prompt me if I can locate them on my screen. Bear with me.
Yeah, sorry for that. My internet connection broke down. So yeah, to answer the rest of the question, yes, I will come to the QUIC community for further help with this. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Libor. And thank you again for sort of running through that. That was very good. Right, let me go back to my original slide. So just to remind you where we are, and I will keep an eye on the time. So that's the sort of DoQ on authoritatives, a very helpful update. I just wanted to signpost a few recent developments, details of which are both on the slide and also in the sort of weekly email that I send out with news headlines. But maybe just I'll highlight a couple of these. First, I thought there was an interesting article about an alternative to private relay, or with private relay-like features being developed currently on Android devices. There was a very interesting article in Wired within the last few days, which sort of runs through some of the various features of that particular service. Which, if you're interested, in my view, it's well worth a read if time permits. Also, in the RIPE blog this week, I think she's on the call currently, Kathleen authored an article about indicators of compromise and where that's sort of shared, that responsibility is shared across multiple actors, some of the sort of issues and challenges and sort of lessons learned from doing that, which is also well worth a read. And then probably the last one I'll highlight, just the third one on the list, is the Oblivious HTTP standard. Is currently at working group last call. So if you have any thoughts on that, use the link to sort of pick up the message on the OHI mailing list, and make sure you share your responses as that goes through the last call process, before it's too late, if you have any thoughts on that. Just sort of running through some forthcoming events. One thing which perhaps people, if you'd missed, I just thought it was worth highlighting. You've got the IAB sort of virtual workshop coming up in mid-October on management techniques in encrypted networks. That's a virtual workshop that's due to run over a number of days, but with an optional sort of in-person day, potentially on the 24th of October. And the reason I mention that is because that would take place in person in Belgrade, which also in Belgrade, the 2 days beforehand will be OARC 39. And then RIPE 85 is running through Monday to Friday, the week 24th to 28th. And I think the intent is the IAB, if they have an in-person day, would sort of be accommodated within the sort of RIPE sort of scheduling, being sort of so if I understood the material correctly, potentially even co-located in the same venue to make attendance by RIPE attendees straightforward. So if people were uncertain whether it was worth an investment of their time in actually going in person to Belgrade, as you can see, there's potentially OARC and RIPE and an IAB workshop happening over a 7-day period. So that could well tip the balance on people going. So I think worth highlighting. And then just a few things coming up in terms of calls for papers and workshop proposals. Deadline today for NANOG 86, taking place in Hollywood, if I recall, later on in the year. Then you've got the IB workshop itself has got a deadline of the 19th, so at the end of this week, if you want to put forward papers potentially for the workshop that I mentioned earlier. Then RIPE 85, deadline on 21st, including the RIPE DNS working group, which has also got a call for papers. The call that I saw didn't have a deadline on it, but I'm assuming is on or around the 21st August as well. So anyone that's got any thoughts on that, that's coming up. And then you've got a slightly longer if you've got any proposals for OARC 39. That deadline's the 6th of September. So a few things coming up over the next week. And then OARC 39 a little bit later. in terms of future call topics, again, various things coming up. Because I've been reminded that 5th of September is Labor Day in the US, so I'm not proposing we have a presentation on the call on that day, but we'll make that a more informal discussion. So open to any topics people want to cover during that call if you're around. And then on the 12th of September, tentatively, we'll have a second panel discussion, just focusing on some learnings from deployment of and scaling of support for encrypted DNS in recursive resolvers. Just finalizing the timing on that, but it's looking like we should have Google and Comcast both on the call, just subject to going through internal processes to confirm that, and then hopefully also participation from Open Exchange and Infoblox. And then tentatively the following week, I'm hoping Emily Taylor should be able to join us to talk about the DNS Research Federation, which sort of founded last year, but is just starting to build up ahead of steam. So Emily will be coming to the call at some point, but hopefully the 17th of September to talk about that. And then sort of just finalised this afternoon on the 26th September, we'll be talking about the impact of encrypted DNS on internet filtering. Just picking up a conversation which started during one of the working group sessions at the back end of IETF 114. So one of the authors is coming back to join us to sort of continue that discussion. With a few more things, as you see, sort of coming along, dates still to be finalised on those, but potentially we've got quite a sort of good series in September, and I'll should be able to email you a bit later this week to let you know what the content will be for Monday, because again, I'm just waiting for that to this coming Monday, that is, to be finalised. I think, yeah, that was everything from me. So I'll just see if there's any other business. So anyone wants to unmute if there's anything you want to come on with. Also just see if there's anything in the chat. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Chris just reminded me that the working group last call deadline was yesterday, but potentially still opportunity to post any comments to the Ohio working group chairs and the mailing list. And yeah, the gap between RIPE and IETF is annoying. Yeah, with so much through that week. I'm sure there's plenty of things you can do if you don't want to. Assuming you're based in the States, Michael. So assuming you don't want to travel back, no doubt there's plenty of other things sort of going on. But if anyone's aware of anything specifically, by all means put them in the chat.
Nanog is up again.
Ah, yes, yeah, which makes it rather difficult, doesn't it, to go to and fro? Yeah, as you say, there's a lot.
Nanog is in Hollywood for that meeting, so it's Hollywood to Belgrade to London.
Gosh, that will help with your frequent flyer miles if you want to do all of those. Fine. So, anything from anyone else? Let me just stop sharing. So anyone else with anything you wanted to highlight, by all means, sort of unmute if you do. So we just run up to the hour. Right, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so yeah, if anyone's got any papers you're thinking of submitting, just be aware you've got a few deadlines starting from today, sort of rolling through this week. So don't miss those if you want to take part in any of those forthcoming events. But with that, hope you found that presentation from Libor of value. I certainly thought it was very useful and raised some very interesting practical points. So thank you again, Libor, for that. And everybody else, thanks for joining. Have a fantastic week, and look forward to catching up same time next week. So enjoy the rest of this week, everyone. Thanks for your time.